for today. The topic is the population expansion or explosion in Africa, and Dr. Madu has given us some information in reference to the world's population and has indicated that Africa, in a real sense, is growing in terms of the world population. Let's pick up where we left off, Dr. Madu.
You know, the United Nations says that in 2050, 7 of the 20 most populous countries in the world will come from Africa. What is frightening about it is that there's a whole lot of leapfrogging in terms of population in African countries. Now, for example, Nigeria has 160 million people today. The United Nations says in 2050, Nigeria will be the 4th largest country in the world in terms of population, with a population of 389 million people. Currently, the United States has what? A little bit over 300 million. But in 2050, the United States will be 403 million people. So compare the gap, Nigeria, you know, right now, we are almost twice the size of Nigeria. But then come 2050, Nigeria will be almost close to the United States in population.
And that's not far down the road either.
That's correct, not far down the road. Currently, Brazil has more population than Nigeria. But in 2050, Nigeria will be over Brazil in terms of population. You know? So these are the frightening statistics. The Democratic Republic of the Congo today has 69 million people. In 2050, it will be the 10th largest country in the world in terms of population, with 148 million people. Ethiopia today has about 85 million people. In 2050, Ethiopia will be the 11th largest country in the world with 145 million people. Tanzania today has 41 million people. In 2050, Tanzania will have 139 million people as the 13th largest country in the world. Egypt has 82 million people currently. In 2050, Egypt will have 128 million people, you know, being the 15th largest country in the world. Tanzania currently has 41 million people. In 2050, Tanzania will have 139.
From 40 to 139 million.
Yeah, from 41 to
139 million.
Exactly.
That's almost triple the size of the station. You're saying that the same thing about all of these nations that you make?
That's correct. Kenya currently has 39 million people. In 2050, Kenya will have 96 million people, be the 18th largest country in the world. In the same year, Uganda, which currently has 32 million people, we have 94 million people.
This is almost in a generation, Dr. Madu. That's what you're saying.
That's
is
correct.
That, within a generation, that these countries are going to increase their population by 3 times. And is that what we're saying?
That's correct, and that's what's troubling, because if you look at the statistics, most of the countries that these countries will leapfrog are larger than they are now in terms of population. Okay, in 2050, in India, we have 1.6 billion people. China will be second with 1.2 billion people. Okay? Now, if you look at that, you know, difference, even between India and China, you see that China's population control is working. You remember China exactly. China was the first country that hit 1 billion mark, you know, and they've not moved far from there since then, because the one-child policy is working. Exactly, that's the difference you see with the Indian population and the Chinese population. Exactly, that one-child, this thing is working in China. Now, what are the consequences of, you know, population explosion? When you talk of population explosion, you talk of population that is not being controlled methodically in growth. Nothing wrong with population growing, but it has to be controlled, you know, in order for, you know, the basic infrastructure and all these things to work. Now in Africa, you have all these problems. Okay, population affects the economy. When you have a huge uncontrolled population, you have unemployment. You know, unemployment leads to what? Crimes. You know, now the government is not able to feed this population. It goes on what? Borrowing. You know, And then when government falls in debt, the population gets even, you know, more hungry and all this, leading to social and political instability. A lot of these things you see in Africa are related to it. The environment. Let's take our waste management. Waste management as it is now in Africa is, you know, almost non-existent in some places. Okay, you have more population, then waste management even becomes a problem. Managing your waste. That's why people go to the streams and all this, you know, empty things that turn around and kill people. It affects the environment. You know, people are cutting down trees in order to build more houses. When they are cutting down trees to build more houses, what happens? You have more pollution, you have more erosion, and then because people are cutting trees to build more houses, less farmlands. That leads to what? You know, hunger and all that. The political side of it, yes, when a population grows, the government finds it impossible to feed the people. Basic infrastructures crumble, you know, water resources get dried up, electricity and all this have to be provided, you know. So there's social and political instability because of the growth of population. For example, some of the wars you've seen in Africa are wars over control of land and resources. Even in Rwanda and Burundi. Rwanda and Burundi are the two most densely populated countries in the world, okay? So there's always a constant, you know, fight over land. You see, over land. And that triggers what? A lot of, you know, insecurities, a lot of tensions, and you have all this, you know, people explode. So a lot of those problems we see in those countries, apart from the, you know, ethnic thing, is a, you know, a fight over the resources of the country. Now, having said that, what should some of these countries in Africa be doing in order to contain the, you know, control the population? They can adopt the Chinese method, you know.
One child.
Yes, one child per family, or two children per family. Because right now, in comparison to the Western countries, where, you know, the average is about 1.9, you know, children, like they say. And then some in Asia is about 2 point some currently. In Africa it's 5.5 or so. So the average African family, you know, is 4 or 5 children, 6 children. Okay, so that has to be controlled. One way of controlling that is making sure that people understand that having too many children could lead to a lot of consequences, poverty, you know, etc., etc.
And of course, Dr. LMadu, we're getting ready for this second commercial break, after which we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.